Sifu is a martial arts game with a strong roguelite component, and it's been pretty high on my most anticipated games list since it was revealed in a PlayStation State of Play last year. I thought it looked awesome, and despite not being a big fan of developer Slowclap's prior game Absolver, I was cautiously optimistic about Sifu, and the more we saw of it, the more convinced I became that Sifu was going to be great. And fortunately, Sifu feels every bit as satisfying to play as it looked like it would be. Sifu's excellent combat system delivers all the stylish action promised by its trailers, and its aging mechanics bring something entirely new to the roguelite genre. Because of this, Sifu is not just a great game, but an exceptional one. Sifu's story starts out as a seemingly straightforward revenge tale. It begins in a martial arts dojo with a former student of the dojo named Yang and his 4 cronies storming the dojo in search of an artifact housed there. Yang massacres the students of the dojo as well as his former teacher, and that's where the protagonist comes in. You play as the child of the dojo's master, who witnesses the atrocities committed by Yang before being cut down by one of Yang's goons. They're then resurrected by a mystical talisman, and this talisman is how the core gimmick of Sifu comes into play. The protagonist then spends several years training and preparing to seek revenge, and at the age of 20 sets out to hunt down Yang and his accomplices. This simple yet epic opening sets the stage for the action to come in Sifu and immediately pulls you into the world. The talisman that resurrects the protagonist allows for a unique spin on the roguelite formula, as each time they die, the talisman will revive them. However, this comes at a cost. Each time you die, your character ages. As the protagonist gets older, their attacks become more powerful as their mastery over their martial arts techniques increases. But on the flip side, their health bar gradually shrinks and the damage they take from attacks also increases, as they're gradually becoming more frail. And once you hit age 70, the final notch on the talisman breaks, so if you die too many times, it's game over. For each subsequent death, your death counter will increase by 1. This counter determines how many years you'll age when you die, so if you start at age 20, then die several times in a row, you'll go from age 20 to 21 to 23 to 26 to 30 and so on. While there's no way to bring your age back down in a run, there are ways to decrease or reset the death counter so you're at least not aging so quickly. Defeating a strong group of enemies will take a year off of your death counter, and there are statues where you can pay to reset your death counter back to 0. Of course, the most tantalizing looking aspect of Sifu was always its combat system, and thankfully it is where Sifu shines the brightest. Sifu's combat is nothing short of sublime. In fact, its fluid and flexible combat mechanics provide the best in-game fights in recent memory. You'll need to get used to juggling light and heavy attacks, combos, blocks, parries, throws, sweeps, and finishers. And Sifu does a great job of forcing you to mix up your attack patterns by throwing interesting groupings of enemies at you. You'll also want to intently study the move list in the pause menu so you can have the biggest repertoire of techniques as possible memorized. Because of this, Sifu has a lot more in common with fighting games than other roguelites, and having fighting game style mechanics mixed into a third-person action game gives Sifu's fights a distinct feeling unlike anything else on the market. Sifu rewards aggression and incentivizes you to use finishers as frequently as possible, as defeating an enemy with a finisher by pressing triangle and circle together when an enemy is near death will refill a little bit of your health. You'll want to carefully analyse the environment when instigating a fight in Sifu, as environmental awareness is often the key to success. Throwing enemies over balconies, kicking furniture into enemies, and throwing the bottles and bricks that are littered around the environment at enemies to daze them are all great ways to help with crowd control and allow you to take out a couple of the weaker enemies in a group straight away to make fights less overwhelming. When facing a group of enemies in Sifu, you'll need to prioritise which enemies to take out first. You'll want to keep an eye out for enemies that have weapons, as well as heavy enemies who have unblockable attacks that need to be dodged. On more than a few occasions, I'd get too focused on fighting a group of enemies, only to have a heavy enemy charge in, pick me up and slam me to the floor, draining a decent chunk of my health bar in an instant. You'll also be able to pick up a variety of weapons ranging from staffs to bats to knives. These weapons look and feel awesome to use, and they're extremely versatile, making them useful for multiple situations. Weapons are very powerful, and blunt weapons in particular shred through enemies' health and stamina, which makes them ideal for taking out large groups. You can also perform a one-hit kill with a bladed weapon by holding down triangle. This will break the weapon, but it's well and truly worth the sacrifice if you're able to take out a heavy enemy in one strike. A weapon also makes it easier to block incoming attacks, which is especially handy in boss fights. You also have access to a range of special moves called focus attacks. When you've defeated enough enemies to fill your focus bar, you'll be able to pick one of these techniques from a radial menu when holding L1. These moves include an eye poke to daze enemies, and a heavy leg sweep that'll take even the most sturdy enemy to the ground. There are even focus moves that require a specific weapon to perform, like the bat's face smash or the knife's thigh slash. The focus techniques are among the most valuable abilities in your moveset, and using one at the right time can completely change the tide of a battle. There are a couple of bosses that I honestly don't know if I could have beaten without using focus techniques. Sifu'S boss fights are remarkable. In fact, they're some of my favourite boss fights ever. Sifu'S bosses are often very challenging due to their unpredictable behaviour, so it can take a good few attempts to wrap your head around their attack patterns and how you can most effectively counterattack them. Impressively, all 5 of Sifu'S boss fights are great, though the latter 3 are definitely a notch above the first 2. Each boss fight is split into 2 distinct phases, with the second phase not only switching up the boss's attacks and behaviour, but also the arena that you're fighting in. Bosses can catch you off guard with completely unexpected manoeuvres. For example, the first time I encountered the first boss, I decided to take a step back and stood behind a table. I thought that this could give me a bit of breathing room and a moment to think about what my next move was going to be. Instead, the boss charged straight at me, slid underneath the table, and took me out at the legs before I ever saw it coming. The third boss, the artist, was probably my favourite. She has an amazing character design, and I love how drastically the battle shifts between her 2 phases. In her first phase, the artist relentlessly attacks you with a bladed staff, charging at you with near endless feeling combos that require pinpoint precision to avoid. While in her second phase, she switches to kunai knives, charging in for quick combos that you can parry, before backing off and getting some distance so that she can throw her kunai at you. This was the first fight that I really got stuck on in Sifu, but once I managed to get her pattern down, I was rewarded with a feeling of accomplishment that I've only felt in the Souls games before. The final boss is also incredible. He forces you to put everything the game has taught you into practice, and it's by far the most challenging fight in Sifu, as Yang is invulnerable to your focus attacks, so your dodge and parry timing needs to be impeccable. There's a trophy in Sifu for finishing the game below the age of 25, and I probably had to redo the final boss fight 15 times to successfully beat him at that age. While keeping it vague to avoid spoiling anything, I will say there's also an alternative way to tackle each boss fight, and completing the fights this way is required to see the true ending and get the platinum trophy, so Sifu has a great amount of replay value. Every battle in Sifu has an epic cinematic feeling to it, and this is largely thanks to the game's camera that dynamically shifts in and out as you play. This allows Sifu to add additional tension through intimate close-up shots in boss battles, while also pulling the camera out to give you more peripheral vision when fighting a large group, so you're not getting caught off guard by attacks you couldn't have seen coming. The camera will even switch to a side-on perspective at times as you fight your way through long corridors and hallways. When you really get into the rhythm of Sifu's combat, fights start to flow like masterfully choreographed action scenes that would be right at home in The Raid or John Wick. And it's impossible to not feel a little bit like Daredevil as you storm through a hallway, decimating every enemy in your path. As you fight through Sifu's levels, you'll also rack up a score that's based on your performance. You'll want to keep your score multiplier as high as possible throughout the level by taking down as many enemies as you can without taking a hit. There's been a lot of talk about Sifu's difficulty since it released. Sifu is no doubt a difficult game, but it's also one of the most perfectly balanced games in recent memory. While Sifu is challenging, it's never frustrating. It's a game that truly rewards you for learning the ins and outs of its combat system and enemy attack patterns. The more you put into Sifu, the more you're going to get out of it. As you play, you can feel yourself getting progressively better and better at Sifu. After about 23 hours of playing Sifu, I've cleared the game several times and gotten the Platinum Trophy. I can even get through the first few levels without losing a life, which is something that I wouldn't have believed I'd ever be capable of when I first started Sifu. Sifu offers character progression through a skill tree, with skills being unlocked with the XP you get for defeating enemies. While you initially only keep these skills for your current run, there is a way to unlock them permanently. Once you've unlocked a skill on a run, you can buy it again, and if you buy it 5 additional times, it'll be unlocked permanently. These skills add new combos and techniques to expand your moveset, and unlocking some of them permanently feels pretty essential, especially the ability that lets you catch objects that are thrown at you and use them against enemies. Being able to catch bottles and bricks is hugely helpful when fighting large crowds where you can't keep an eye on everyone at once, and being able to catch the third boss's kunai knives makes her second phase substantially easier. You'll also find statues throughout Sifu's levels that can reward you with different perks. You can only unlock one perk at a time, and there are 3 categories of perk. The first are perks that can only be unlocked before a certain age, the second are perks that can only be unlocked once you've reached a certain score in a level, and the third are perks that require XP to unlock. These perks include increasing health recovery from takedowns, better weapon durability, or even having your death counter reset. Each of Sifu's 5 levels has an investigation board that you can fill in by picking up collectibles that are scattered throughout the environment. While most of these collectibles are just for show, some of them are passes and keys that can unlock shortcuts through the level, giving you a more direct route to the boss on repeat visits to the stage, so it's well and truly worth taking the time to explore every nook and cranny of a level. Sifu also features a simple dialogue tree, and while it seems meaningless at first, choosing specific dialogue options is the key to getting certain collectibles, and you'll even be able to occasionally talk your way out of a fight. One of my favourite aspects of Sifu is its hyper-stylized visuals. Sifu's art style consists of lots of sharp edges and also utilises colour to wonderful effect. This is best showcased in the club level that regularly throws in splashes of neon red and blue to add additional flair to the level, and the snow-coated third boss arena that allows the design of the boss herself to really pop. Sifu's music is also consistently great, with the music in the club and the 4th boss fight being standouts. The score really adds a lot to the vibe of Sifu, and I'd highly recommend playing at least some of Sifu with headphones on. The only real complaint I have about Sifu is that I did encounter a couple of strange glitches. Oddly, both of the noteworthy glitches I ran into were in the 3rd stage. Countless times when I tried to enter the elevator in this level, I'd end up running straight into an invisible wall, and needing to press the elevator button again after the doors had already opened to clear it. And on 3 separate occasions, I got stuck in the 3rd stage's boss arena after defeating the artist, with no way to progress. While these annoying quirks didn't sour my overall experience with Sifu, it was strange that they occurred repeatedly in an otherwise very polished game. At a time when roguelites are a dime a dozen, it's awesome to see a studio do something genuinely new and refreshing within the genre. To put it plainly, I adore Sifu. Its sleek visuals, banging soundtrack, masterfully balanced difficulty, and endlessly satisfying combat system make it not only an early Game of the Year contender, but one of my favourite games of this generation, if not one of my favourite games of all time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, or leave a comment. You can find countless other videos on my channel, including my recent review of Nobody Saves the World, and be sure to stay tuned for my upcoming review of Rainbow Six Extraction.